Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of Triangle Investor Interviews. I'm your host Lucian Valkovic, and before I announce my guest, just a reminder of a disclaimer. This interview and all my interviews are not a recommendation to buy, sell any shares, products or services. Always do your due diligence and consult with your financial advisor. That said, today's guest is Bruce Lane, CEO of GTI Energy, a uranium development and exploration company with assets in Wyoming and Utah. Bruce, always good to see you. Welcome back.
Hi, Lucian. Great to be back with you again.
Let's start with we have a lot of things to discuss. Maybe first, U.S. federal government has recently prioritized fast-tracking permitting for critical mineral projects, including uranium, which is a big news for the industry, for the sector. Let's put this news in the context of your company. How could GTI Energy Wyoming projects such as Lo Herma benefit from this streamlined permitting process?
Yeah, look, it's clear that the agencies want to see more projects getting accelerated, and we know that in our communication so far with the likes of particularly the BLM, that they're keen to see projects that can be accelerated. So the path is there. We've seen Anfield just in the last couple of days get commitment to accelerating their project through for Velvet Wood through permitting. So we know it's happening. Look, the point where it becomes most appropriate to us is when we want to go for a plan of operations for the construction and further development of the project. It could help at in the exploration stage with exploration permitting as well. I don't think there's any question it's going to help in that area. But the big gain for us would be when we get to that plan of operations stage and we're looking to get into our construction permit. So that's in the future for us, and hopefully in the not too distant future. And we certainly see it as being extremely positive.
Definitely. Yeah, the Department of Interior announced that permitting process for energy projects could be reduced as little as 28 days for some initiatives. I mean, given the GTI's reliance of Bureau of Land Management, BLM, and Wyoming state permits, and not just GTI, I mean the other companies, how realistic is that timeline for your and other projects?
Yeah, 28 days is certainly on the extreme end. But we've got a few different permits to get through. Some at the state level. We've got one or two EPA permits that are required, and clearly the state of Wyoming is the major actor for us, and so they work in conjunction with the other agencies, and later on in the process with the NRC as well. Look, 28 days would be potentially for a project that's quite a long way down the track already, and we need water monitoring data, baseline data for the project, and it takes time to actually gather that information. We do need it over a period of time. So, look, it's positive, but 28 days is a bit unrealistic for a project that's not already very advanced.
Yeah, I agree on that. Nevertheless, you are moving your projects, they are going forward. Can you provide an overview of the Lo Herma ISR uranium project and explain why the completion of the key input studies announced, I believe that was the beginning of April, considered as a significant milestone? What is big with this news?
Yeah, look, we're heading towards a scoping study, and the key inputs require obviously the drilling and the permeability and hydrology information, the network, the process design, engineering and costing, the well field design and costing. So we've gotten through all of those bits of work, and at the moment we're just trying to finish off our study and get it ready to be published, and we're hoping that's not too far away. I think I've guided before the end of this quarter, and look, maybe it's more like weeks than months, but we're certainly in the process getting very close to the end of pulling all that together and being able to publish it and demonstrate the baseline economics for the project.
Yeah, you have been communicating about the completion in Q2 of 2025. Bruce, what are the primary objectives of this scoping study and how will it shape the future of the Lo Herma project?
Yeah, what we're trying to establish is that the economics justify continuing investment, both so we can demonstrate that to shareholders, but obviously from a funding point of view and more generally. And look, we're constructing the scoping study as a central processing plant so that we can actually get through the extraction, the processing into drums of uranium oxide or yellow cake for delivery. We've also run a scenario as a satellite operation, which would be about producing loaded resin beads and then potentially sending them to a third-party facility, should that opportunity arise. So we'll look at it through both of those lenses, but our primary focus is a central processing plant. And look beyond what we've got in terms of defined resources. We've got a fairly substantial exploration target on top of the existing resource, and it's in the range 6 to 11 million pounds additional. And so we'd look to push on beyond the current resource and add further pounds into the study. So we know that if we can add, say, another £1 million, when that drops through to the bottom line in the project scenario, it's well worth doing that extra drilling and expansion work. So, hopefully the study will demonstrate that clearly, and it'll show that further investments are more than justified.
Sure. Let's touch a little bit on the technical side of the project. The release highlighted the completion of conceptual designs and cost estimates for mine and wellfield layouts, wellfield construction, and uranium process plant engineering. Can you elaborate on the key findings or innovations in these designs?
Yeah, look, in terms of innovations in the design, we're actually treading a well-worn path, if you like. These sorts of mines have been permitted in Wyoming since the 1970s, and we've got 7 permitted facilities around us, a number of built, constructed facilities, and some operating. For example, GTI Energy and UEC's Irrigary. So we're not doing anything that's really that different to anyone around us. The testing that we've done to date indicates that the ore will be amenable to alkaline leach, and so we don't have to mess around with acid and sort of deal with the complexities of metallurgical challenges around an acid plant. So there's nothing particularly new in what we're doing, and that's, I think, a great thing. It shouldn't throw up too many challenges in respect of the metallurgy and the extraction. And so what we'll be doing is the bore field will be injection and extraction wells using bicarb of soda and as the lixiviant, and we'll be using an ion exchange resin bead process, which is pretty much the same as everyone else is using in Wyoming. And the back end of the plant, similarly, there's nothing exotic or experimental in any of that. So it's really down to what the resource in the ground is, and it being able to deliver, the throughputs that we're planning.
Sure. Bruce, correct me if I'm wrong. The company reported uranium leach recovery is up to 80% from the agitation test. How do these results influence the confidence in the project's technical feasibility? Are there plans to optimize these recoveries further?
Look, there's no doubt opportunities to optimize those recoveries going forward, and in fact, the residence time or for the leach process is cut off at a point, but in fact, what normally happens is you continue to recirculate as part of the reclamation and restoration, and inevitably you get higher recoveries through that process. But look, it's the number that we were expecting, and it against our peers, it's certainly comparable, and there may be opportunities to optimize that in the future, but that really wasn't the focus of our initial work. We did a limited number of studies, and they using a lixiviant that we thought was appropriate for the area and the mineralisation, and it gave us the result without any messing around. So that was very comforting, and the opportunities to optimise that will come later.
Understood. Bruce, can you walk me through the next steps? I mean, the next steps for, let's say, remainder of 2025. What are the key things you plan to achieve?
Yeah, once we've published the study, we'll then look to plan. Well, we've got a plan and process for further drilling, subject to funding, and we've got some pump testing to do on some of the water wells that we installed earlier this year. And then we'd look to put more water monitoring wells in and extend the resource to bring some of that exploration target into resource. And at the same time, we'll obviously start working on the longer term permitting aspects so that we're able to advance it as quickly as possible.
Okay, can you expand on this long-term permitting? What permits do you need to secure going forward?
Look, there's a number of permits. I think there's state permits to allow for mining, and we need an aquifer exemption to be able to tap into the aquifer and inject and extract from the aquifer. And really, the longer term permitting is the water monitoring work. And so we've got to put in water monitoring wells within the resource area and around the resource area, and then collect baseline data, and that's submitted as part of the permitting process. And because when we go to restore the well field or reclaim it, those are the levels that we've got to get back to for the trace elements and the metallurgy in the water that's already there. So that's the major part. We've got an EPA permit for re-injecting or injecting waste into the ground, and we'll have an air quality permit for drying. There's quite a number of permits, and but it's as I said before, it's not a mystery. It's a well walked path in Wyoming, and the regulatory agencies are very familiar with these sorts of projects, both from the past, but also from current projects that have been permitted. For instance, GTI Energy, the Shirley Basin project, and they recently got an extension on their aquifer exemption for their Lost Creek plant where they're expanding that. So we don't see any particular issues in any of that. It just takes a bit of time.
Yeah. What about skilled labor? Have you experienced any obstacles with your exploration programs over there? I mean, with secure the drilling company and all other works that you plan to do. Do you see any obstacles in hiring companies, people to do that work?
Yeah, look, at the stage we've been, we haven't had any obstacles. You've always got to negotiate to get a drill rig in place, but we've got a driller just down the road from the project, and a drilling company, and they've been working with us for a few years. So look, no doubt we'll get to a point where we need more drilling capacity, and we'll have to secure that, but we don't see that as being insurmountable. And when we get to the construction stage, obviously that's a whole new team of people that we don't have at the moment. So we'll have to build that capacity.
Definitely. You mentioned Anfield, and Anfield will get fast track permitting on their Utah project. We didn't mention your Utah projects as well. Do you see how will you position your Utah project in the portfolio? I know that the focus is on Lo Herma, on Wyoming projects, but how are the Utah projects looking at how are you looking at the future of those projects?
Yeah, as you said, Lucien, we've sequenced the Lo Herma project ahead of our other projects, and I think for obvious reasons. And so we've put the Utah projects really on the back burner. We've got a very clear idea about how we could develop those projects in terms of increasing, defining a resource. We've got an internal exploration target on those projects, but we need to do some work, a small amount of drilling to be able to upgrade those to JORC compliant resources. It's easy access. It's kind of four seasons working environment. And we know that the state of Utah is very supportive of uranium mining projects at the moment. I think they're the one state in particular that has really got behind the whole process, and that's evidenced by what's happened with Velvet Wood for Anfield. So we believe it's a very good place to work. It's really just having the capacity and the bandwidth to move those projects forward. So we're continually assessing that. I think the location of the projects is very interesting, given what's happening with that shootering mill owned by Anfield and the fact that they're really doing their best to push that forward. And we know that Western Uranium Vanadium are very active not too far away as well. So look, they're certainly valuable to us. I'm just not sure the timing for when we would get to doing further work on those at this point.
Sure, but like you said, that project is not far from the compliant resources. You don't have to do a lot of work to bring this to a resource category, right?
Oh, that's right. I think the amount of spend we're talking there is in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, certainly not the millions. And there are definitely pounds of uranium and vanadium there. We just haven't been able to spend the money to put numbers around that at this point. Very shallow, down to sort of 20 or 30 feet. Previous mining on the properties. So look, it's a great environment. It's really just a case of how many things can we do at once, and where's the biggest bang for our buck, and that's why we focused on Lo Herma.
Yeah, just to bring closer to our audience the proximity of Western Uranium, Anfield, and Energy Fuels White Mesa. How far are those companies from your project?
Look, we're probably about 100 miles as the crow flies from White Mesa, a little bit further by road. We're actually very close. Some of our projects are very close to the Shooter Canyon mill, Anfield's mill. Look, there's a few projects there we haven't done much work on, but they do represent an opportunity to supply mill feed to one of the mills in the district. And that's an opportunity there to be grasped in the future, I think.
Okay, so that Utah project does not have any ISR potential. It's a conventional mining.
Yeah, it would be conventional mining at this stage. The traditional form of mining there has been mostly underground, although there are some open pit operations. There have been some open pit operations around, so we wouldn't completely discount that. They're well above the water table, so not suitable for ISR, but quite good projects for conventional mining.
Sure. Bruce, final question. News flow. Investors always like to hear what can they expect in the upcoming period when it comes to the news flow.
Yeah, the key thing is going to be the scoping study. And as I said, I don't expect it to be months. I expect it to be weeks, and hopefully not too far away. So that's the major thing that we're pushing towards, and I think the major thing in terms of defining the company's value and its potential success going forward. So that's the one to look out for.
And I wish you luck with that, Bruce. That was Bruce Lane, CEO of GTI Energy. Bruce, let's talk soon when we will have some updates from the company.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, Lucian. It's good to talk again.